Hello and welcome. Today's video is just a short update on how things are going with the wood turning. Well, short, it might not be short. I'll try and keep it short and brief. The first bit of news, my new tool rest has arrived. Nice and heavy and strong. And it does fit into the banjo. The banjo is this piece on the lathe that slides up and down and the tool rest fits into. Now I only know that because a kind viewer let me know that this is a banjo. I had no clue whatsoever, so thanks for that, Max. My tool rest does fit nicely into the banjo, and I was concerned when I ordered it that it just might be a little too tight, but it does seem to be too tall. So even fitted into the banjo nice and smoothly, it still sits higher than the center point of my lathe, and I don't think that's good. I think I want to be at the center point or just slightly under, but I don't know, because you put a chisel against the wood, yeah, you're not good. I do have a grinder. I haven't used it in donkey's years. I've had no cause to. So I will be able to cut the bottom off of this and make it shorter so it can be used with this lathe. But as I said when I made my wooden tool rest, it is so lovely and strong and beautiful until it breaks, which it probably will eventually. I'm not in any rush to be replacing it. So for now, the wooden tool rest is going to stay. But when it breaks, if it breaks, I'll be able to replace it with this one. Now I'm not going to cut this any shorter just yet. Mainly because at some point I plan to get a bigger, better lathe. And I might actually get a bigger, better lathe before my wooden tool rest breaks on me. Then I'll be sad that I cut this short. It may end up being too short for my future new lathe. So for now, it can sit on the shelf, ready for action, if and when it's needed. It's nice to know it's here. Another new thing I've bought myself is a bowl gouge. Where is it? Here. Is a beautiful new bowl gouge. Now, when I got my lathe, it came with two perfectly functional chisels. I've used them lots. I have my skew chisel and what I thought was a bowl gouge. And I use the bowl gouge lots because I've been making lots of bowls. It surprised me how many bowls I've actually made. I put them all out on a fancy display the other day just to take a photo. So here they are. All my lovely bowls, minus one. It has already been gifted to a friend. Made with my cheapy Parkside lathe and a spindle gouge. And I've been making little wooden mushrooms, very cute. So with the two chisels that came with my lathe, I've made a raft of beautiful bowls and I'm very pleased with them. Now it turns out that what I thought was a bowl gouge is actually a spindle gouge. Didn't stop me carving all those lovely bowls with it though. As I've been sharpening it over the months, I have been sharpening it in more of a bowl gougey style by sweeping back the edges first and then rounding out the tip. So I've created a more arc-shaped end to my once spindle gouge. Now, as I said, I use my bowl gouge, spindle gouge lots and decided I would treat myself to a fancy, new, better quality bowl gouge. So I searched through the internet and found a bowl gouge that looked good, ordered it and it arrived. And when my beautiful bowl gouge arrived, I was very surprised. The tip at the end looked most peculiar compared to the bowl gouge I thought I already had. Can we see it? Is the camera picking it up? So when I unwrapped the package, and this wasn't quite as I expected, I thought they've sent the wrong thing. It's very nice, but it's not what I ordered. I fished out my order and took a look. They had indeed sent exactly what I ordered. And it was at that point I learned that the chisel I'd been using up to then was actually a spindle gouge. So my original spindle gouge has a much shallower channel up the middle. It's more of a, I don't know, a gentle curve, whereas the bowl gouge has a much more severe channel in the centre, making its end tip more of a U shape. I'm very pleased with it. It feels lovely in the hand, and I can see it's going to work very nicely. Well, I hope it's going to work very nicely. I've not used it yet on a bowl. I did put it against a piece of wood and went, ooh, lovely and sharp, but I haven't actually made a full item with it. So I'm looking forward to trying it out and seeing how I get on, because I've been doing very well with my spindle gouge, so it'll be a bit strange using a completely new shaped tool. So that's my lovely shiny new bowl gouge, yet to be tried. An adventure for a future video. Now, an adventure I have been having, a few of the willow bowl blanks I harvested many weeks ago now. A couple of them started to dry out too fast. Although the trees were long since dead and the wood was pretty dry already, we had a couple weeks of belting hot heat wave, which has been wonderful, but the wood was starting to dry and crack. So a piece of information I'd picked up somewhere some time ago was to soak your freshly cut wood in buckets of water to keep it moist and stop it drying out too fast and cracking. So I plunged a couple of my willow bowl blanks into a tub of water. Now, you're supposed to change the water every 2 or 3 days. Well, I did not. About 10 days, maybe 2 weeks after they'd been plunged into a vat of water, they were still there in the same now disgusting, manky, putrid smell. I poured out the water and gave them some fresh. But the cracks in the wood had closed up. I had no confidence that they were going to stay closed when the wood eventually dries out. There's no glue. The tree's not growing anymore. It can't heal and mend. So I don't really understand how the process would work. You've got a split, you get it wet and it closes up, but it's only wet with water. As it dries out, surely it's going to dry out and open up again. But hey, nothing to lose, let's give it a go. So as I said, my wood had spent 2 weeks in the same bucket of water. I eventually changed the water and they spent a further week without any water changes. By now we can say they were pretty smelly. Not completely vile, but not pleasant. So I finally took my biggest, fattest chunk and put it in some fresh, clean water and changed the water every day for 3 or 4 days. And gradually it did indeed start to smell a little less revolting. Finally, with a bit of time on my hands, I decided to leave it out in the air for a couple of days and then have a go at turning it on the lathe and see what happened. So when I put it on the lathe, it still had a hint of a smell about it, but other than that, it behaved very nicely. So here is the bowl I carved out of that slightly smelly piece of waterlogged wet wood. Like all of my bowls, I love it. Now I have purposefully left it very thick. As I say, I wasn't confident that drying out this wasn't going to start cracking and splitting. So I wanted a thick, chunky piece of wood that might hold itself together better rather than trying to get too thin. Another reason for leaving the sides quite deep and thick is I chose to leave this natural wood edge This is where the bark was in contact with the original tree trunk. So there's a big edge here, and then around the other side there's a smaller area of it. So this was a purposeful choice, was to leave this, because it was really nice, having spent time soaking in the water and the bark had peeled off, and this was nice and smooth and lovely, and I like the slightly ripply, and I really like the feel of it. So it got to stay. So that was another reason I couldn't carve out the inside too far, because that would make this live edge too thin. Another thing I did differently with this bowl was in the bottom. I don't know how well the camera can get it quite well. I've frequently been making this little indent in the bottom, the sort of area you might normally put a woodchuck into to lock it in place. But I don't usually do this outer rim and give it a sort of foot. So I'm liking the little round foot, it's nice. And also, although I did leave the wood to dry for a couple of days before putting it on the lathe, it was still very wet. And I was very concerned of trying to glue it onto my wooden wood block with the hot glue, knowing this was a very wet piece of wood. Wasn't confident the glue was going to stick. Surprisingly enough, it did a really good job and held fast. So I was pleased and surprised by that. I was very much expecting it to come flying off. So having finished it and taken it off the lathe, I sanded it a little bit, but not too much, because as I said, it was very wet still, and I found that sanding it with the sandpaper wasn't really making it smooth, it was just making it kind of slightly fluffy and velvety. And it is still, at the moment, slightly fluffy and velvety. I quite like that velvety feel though. So as it's been drying out in its bowl shape, I did notice one little crack about a week ago, and I filled the bowl with mineral oil and dredged the outside and wrapped some kitchen paper soaked in oil around it, and just left it overnight sitting completely drenched in oil, knowing that any dry wood would soak up the oil and hopefully help push out whatever moisture's left. But even the oils have started to dry out slightly now. It's not oily, doesn't feel oily and greasy. I don't know if they've dried out or just soaked in, but it's not oily and greasy, just feels like wood. And I have no idea where the crack was because it's disappeared. So all in all, I'm very pleased. Another nice bowl. I think that's it. That's our update for today. New tool rest, new bowl gouge, and a new bowl. Not bad. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time, when hopefully we'll get some actual wood turning and try out that bowl gouge. And remember, whatever you're doing, have fun doing it. Oh yes, I made a dress. Something else I've been doing with all my time. If you've enjoyed today's video, don't forget to click that like button and let me know. Click subscribe and YouTube will make sure you see my next video. So bye for now, and we'll see you next time. And don't forget, whatever you're doing, have fun doing it.